Hello and welcome to Modern Broadcast. Today we're going to be taking our first steps into the world of programming by creating a simple and fun guess the number game using Python. Now, don't worry if you have no experience with coding. I'm going to guide you through each step, and by the end of this video, you'll have created your very own game from scratch. Now, before we get started with coding here, we need to make sure we have Python installed. Python is a programming language that is really beginner friendly and perfect for this project. To check if you have Python installed, you can go to python.org and download it. The installation process is straightforward. Just follow the instructions on the website. It's available for Windows, Mac OS, and other platforms. Now, once you have Python installed, you'll need a place to write your code. Today, we'll use idle, which comes with Python. Open this up. But if you prefer, you can use any text editor or even an online coding platform like Replit. If you're ready, let's open up idle and create a new file. Okay, so here is our untitled project. And first thing that I always like to do is just make a little hashtag here, and I'm going to put today's date. So today is 8/25. Oh my goodness, it is late. This video comes out very soon, doesn't it? So 8/25/24. This project is made by Modern Broadcast. Now, having the hashtag there just means that it's just a note. That way, if someone opens up the code or whatnot, they can see this in here and just know that this project was made by me. So now that we have that set up, let's start writing our code. The first thing that we need to do is tell Python that we want to use a special tool called a module. Now, modules are like add-ons that give Python extra abilities. So they're kind of like power-ups. For our game, we're going to be using the random module, which will help us generate a random number for the player to guess. So in order to do so, we're going to import random. Okay. So by typing import random, we're asking Python to bring in that random module so that we can use it later on in our game. Next, we need to create a random number that the player will try to guess. To do this, we'll create something called a variable. Now, a variable is like a box where we can store information. Now, in our case, we're going to store a random number inside this variable. So we're going to type it random underscore number equals random rand integer, right? Int between 1 and 100. So this is a variable, which is called a random number. We use the randint 1 to 100 function from the random module to generate a random number between 1 and 100. This means that every time the player plays the game, the number they're trying to guess will be different. Let's run that one more time, because there's a lot happening here. So import random is the module. We're telling Python we want to have something be random in our code. And for us, the variable here is the random number. We want to generate a random integer, a random number, between 1 and 100. So now that we have Python going to be randomly generating a number between 1 and 100, it's time to let the player guess what it is. To do that, we need to ask the player to type in their guess. We'll use a function called input for this. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to type in guess equals, and we need to capitalize none. Okay, and I'm going to make a little note here. So the note here is to start with no guess, right? We don't want the game to automatically have an automatic number. We don't want it to guess a number. We don't want it to guess anything. So when we say guess equals none, when we start this up, there will be no start number. It'll be blank. Now we'll need to set up a loop to keep asking the player for a guess until they get it right. So while guess exclamation point equals random number try guess equals int input the number between 1 and 100 and closing brackets there. So the green text will appear. We'll see this. This is printed out. Is guess a number between 1 and 100. That tells our player to put something in because it's an input, right? So here's what's happening. While guess exclamation point random number is telling Python to keep looping through the following steps as long as the player's guess is not equal to the random number. Inside the loop, we use input to ask the player to guess a number. And we're using this int here to make sure that their input is treated as a number. The game will pause here, waiting for the player to type something and press enter. But what if the player accidentally types in text instead of a number? Well, to handle that, we're going to wrap the int function in something called a try except block. This block will try to convert the input to an integer, and if it fails because the input isn't a number, it will give the player an error message and ask them to try again. Just go ahead and push enter and say except value error print. That's not a number. Try again. And then we say continue. So what's happening here is that if the player enters something that isn't a number, the except value error line catches that mistake, and we use print to display a message saying, hey, that's not a number. Try again. Then the continue tells Python to go back to the start of the loop and ask for a new guess. So we're getting set up pretty good here, but after the player makes a valid guess, we need to give them some feedback. Right now, there's no way to tell, are we correct? Are we wrong? Is it too high, too low? So this is where we use conditional statements. These are instructions that tell the program to do something only if a certain condition is met. Let's go ahead and set this up. If guess is less than random number, print too low. Oops. If. So else if, right? Guess is greater than random number. We want it to print too high. Then we have an else. Print congrats. You guessed the number. Here's how it works. The first line, if guess is less than random number. This is checking if the player's guess is lower than the random number. If it is, the game's going to tell the player that it's too low. The second line, the elif, checks if the guess is higher than the random number. And if it is, it's going to say it's too high. Where finally, it's checking if this or if this, otherwise it must be correct. We have our else statement, is what happens if neither of the conditions are true, meaning that the player has to have gotten it correct, and the game congratulates them. That's the code. That's all we need. We've officially made our first game. Let's go ahead and save this. We'll save it to the desktop. We have it here. Let's go ahead and open this up. And we see that we have an error somewhere in our code. It's just disappearing right away. So with Python, with scripting, it's very important to make sure that you type where things need to go. You need to put things where they go. And I see right here, this except value error is indented a little too far. We need to kick it back one. When it looks like it's underneath this try, and it's not supposed to be there. Instead, we want it here, hit save, because this is its own entity. We're going to go ahead and play again. There we have it. Guess a number between 1 and 100. Let's say 41. So we see here another troubleshoot. It's not giving us those messages. Well, why do you think that might be? This is our loop. I have a feeling it's because our if statements are not where they need to be. Let's try saving again and try again. There we have it. Simple placement matters. When these if statements and these conditional branches were all the way over, basically we were telling Python that they were their own complete entity and they're just outside of this loop. That this loop concluded here. That's it. When we have them here, they are now part of this whole loop. So 31 is too low. Let's type some letters. That's not a number. Try again. Perfect. When we try 31, it should be too low. 55. Okay. 43. 47. So somewhere between 47 and 50. Let's go ahead and do 48. 49. One thing you might notice is that when you guess the correct number, the game window closed immediately. And we don't want that to happen because the player won't be able to see the final message. So let's add one more line of code. One more line, so that way the player decides when the game closes. So we're going to go ahead and indent real quick. We're going to type in input, press enter to close the game. So this final input statement will pause the program one last time and wait for the player to press enter. That way they can see the congratulation message before the game closes. Let's go ahead and hit save and try again. 46 is too low. Oops. Quiz time. So we're seeing press enter to close the game. Why do you think that might be? Again, placement matters. We don't want this input to be part of the loop. We don't want it to constantly say press enter to close the game. It has to be outside of that loop. So save, try again. We'll go 45, 21, 31, 41. There we have it. The number was 38. Congratulations, you guessed the number. Press enter to close the game. We push enter. The game closes, ready for us to play again. So before we wrap things up, let's talk about a couple common mistakes. As we already seen, we have placement matters. If it's here, it's within the loop. If it's here, it's outside of the loop as it's its own entity. Another common mistake you might run into would be forgetting to convert the input to an integer using the int right here. If you don't do this, Python is going to treat this input as a string of text, and you'll get an error when it tries to compare the guess to the random number. So let's go ahead and let's just delete int from this. We'll save it. We'll run it again. So guess a number, let's say 34, and the game breaks immediately because it's trying to compare 34 as a string of text and not a number. So int for integer tells us that it's looking for a number to compare. Another common problem are typos. So let's say we don't close off a bracket when we guess the congratulations message. We'll save it. We'll open this up. Just immediately fails. And you can spend hours and hours and hours troubleshooting, looking for bugs, and depending on your code, this is a very short one, so it's very easy to find our error. But when you have codes that are multiple pages or just keeps going and going and going, it makes it really difficult to find very small minor things. Capitalization matters. Else is not the same as else with a capital E. Save that and try that. It errors and shuts down. So capitalization matters. A lot of programmers will put in these hashtags, right here. Start with no guess. That way it's easier to follow with some notes, annotations there. We can put them right here in the middle here, that conditional statements. If, and then we can put down here, wait for user input before closing the game. Things like that. And we can space this out if we need more room for notes, and just makes it easier to follow that, oh, hey, okay, this is what's happening here in this part of the code. This is what's happening here. And that's it. Today we learned how to use Python to create a simple game that challenges the player to guess a random number. Along the way, we covered some key programming concepts like variables, loops, conditionals, user input, and error handling. I encourage you to play around with the code and try to make some changes. Maybe you can adjust the range of the numbers or add a feature that counts how many guesses the player made and shows them at the end. The possibilities are endless. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please consider leaving a like and subscribe. What are your thoughts on this little micro tutorial of Python? Do you guys want more of this type of stuff? Let me know in the comment section down below. Be sure to check out moddedbroadcast.tv for merch and some updates. And have a great week, everyone. Take care.